So good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to our session. So today we're going to be talking about AI and carbon. So these are very interesting topics and the intersection between the two AI or the two buzzwords. And so I have 4 panelists here who will talk about AI from 2 points. So AI. So the topic today is around carbon, and carbon is one of those really transformational products that can create a lot of impact for communities on the continent. And how can we use AI to solve for some of the challenges we've been seeing in the carbon markets, which is around verification, accessibility, ensuring small players, whether it's smallholder farmers, or whether it's small companies or startups on the continent to access these carbon markets. And the other one is the scalability. So scalability has been one of the biggest challenges in terms of verifying and ensuring that some of these carbon credits are generated at scale to benefit the different communities. And we've already started seeing AI really transforming this space, whether it's using satellite imagery to verify carbon credits, optimizing agriculture, optimizing energy, optimizing industry to ensure that we reduce carbon emissions in those cases. And perhaps one of the things that we're going to explore today is how can we use AI to unlock some of the business models that can scale on the continent and benefit a lot of people on the continent. And so we'll have about 30 minutes where we'll explore 3 key topics. One of them is how can we use AI to build trust and also transparency in the carbon markets, which is one of the biggest challenges that we've been seeing in the space. And then what new markets, what business models, what opportunities can AI unlock in the carbon markets? And then the last one is around, what are some of the bold steps that we need to be taking, whether it's our governments or whether it's the startups on the continent, to ensure that the carbon future is fair and transparent for everyone to access. And so at this point, I'll have my panelists introduce themselves and so tell you what they do, and then also how it relates to AI and carbon. And then after that, we'll go into the Q&A session for the panelists. So thank you so much. So over to you at the far right, Flo.
Thank you very much. Really excited about this panel. My name is Florent Doyezu. Thank you, Mariana. But I usually go by Flo. Work in the early stage investment space, initially in consulting, moved into the investment space, working for growth stage and early stage. So really excited to do this. On the side, I'm also part of this thing called Climate Hack, where we encourage and bring together investors in the climate tech space. So yeah, something I do on the side, but really excited about this and looking forward to it.
Thanks. I'm Alice Morton. I'm a program manager for the African Carbon Markets Initiative. So really what ACME is working to do, it's an ecosystem builder, and it's working to make carbon markets work better for Africa. And so we work on integrity, we work on promoting the benefits of African carbon projects, and we work with African governments and policymakers. Yeah. And before that, I was at Cocoa Networks for a long time, so a climate tech company who were a first mover in credits for cook stoves. So yeah, been on the operator side as well. Cool.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Kimani, and I am a carbon technical consultant. I've spent the past 8 years building and implementing nature-based solutions with communities. And for the past 5 years, worked with different carbon developers, developing different climate solutions, nature-based solutions, and energy projects as well. So right now, I support different developers with technical documentation or corporates looking within their supply chains to do carbon insetting and also auditing of carbon projects. And yeah, happy to be in this session.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karaoke Kibadi. I'm the program manager at Decarbonize Initiative. At Decarbonize Initiative, we essentially partner with various global organizations to launch their initiatives locally and also conduct carbon pre-feasibility studies and pilot programs.
And myself, I'm Abel Boreto, as my name is there, like investment director at Novastar. At Novastar, we do have our third fund, which is investing in the climate space. And so we've invested in a few companies that are using carbon credits to either subsidize some of the products and essentially ensure their products are affordable and also ensure that they can scale. So one of them is Cocoa Networks. We've invested in Cocoa Networks in the clean cooking space. We've also invested in Sistema Bio that is using carbon credits to reduce the cost of their biogas digesters, enabling farmers to access those products. And then we've also invested in a few electric mobility businesses here in Nairobi that are also using carbon credits as probably an additional revenues to that. And so happy to moderate this event today, and yeah, looking forward to all the insights from my panelists. And so to start, I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that we've seen in the carbon market. So we've seen a lot of growth, but then in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of challenges with, whether it's the verification aspect of it or some of the other challenges. And I wanted Alice to, talk more about what are some of the challenges we've seen in the carbon markets.
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who set up a carbon project, you probably know that it takes a lot of work. So you're collecting a lot of data. You're going out into the field. You're manually calculating emissions baselines. You're collecting your customer usage data. And you collect data and analyze data both when you register a carbon project, but also when you verify the project every single year. So it's a really big overhead for any carbon project developer. I think the second thing that I want to talk about is there's been a massive challenge around the integrity of carbon credits. So this old way of doing things, the manual collection of data, the manual crunching, the field work, has really fallen out of favor. And we're really seeing a world where the credits that are valuable, the credits that are going to sell, are the ones that use digital monitoring. And that, I think, is where AI can really come in.
Cool. And so the follow-up question to what you're saying is, so how do you see AI being used to solve for some of those challenges that you talked about?
Cool. So lots of different ways. So it depends very much on the type of project. So we have nature-based projects, and here we see AI coming in through the use of satellite imagery to calculate forest cover. We also see the use of AI in soil carbon analysis. And then in technology projects, we'll typically see the use of IoT, internet-connected devices, to collect customer usage data. So basically, we're saying that customer is still using that cook stove 2 years after we sold it.
Okay. Thank you. So another follow-up question to that is for you, Flo, which is around the verification of carbon credits has been one of the sticking points around carbon in the carbon market, and how can we help ensure transparency and prevent greenwashing in a lot of these cases? So you've had, like, I think there was the Guardian article which talked about like some of the forest or agroforestry carbon credits which were found to be, like problematic in terms of verifying that. So how can AI specifically be used in those cases? And can you expound or give a concrete example in that case?
Sure, happy to do so. First of all, thanks for the question. First of all, I think there is a lot of solutions that will actually need a lot of carbon credits to be viable, a lot of impactful solutions, but unfortunately are not yet to the level of reaching commercial viability. And to really push to that level, I think we really need a bit of support from the carbon market space, right? I think Tesla is a really good example. Over the last 10 years, I think they have gotten 9 billion worth of carbon credits, which is a huge amount, and has really helped them, buy the time, buy the resources to actually develop a product that is helpful. And I think we need the same on the continent. How I see AI working, I think the first there's many challenges. I think she has mentioned it. But I think another key challenge that we really need to talk about is really around the data. It's just really hard to obtain data, especially in this kind of markets. A lot of it is stuck in someone's office on a piece of paper. Hard to process this kind of information, hard to consolidate it, and hard to provide insights that will help with verification. And I think that's where AI can play a key role, really, ensuring that you are able to process large information of data and provide very insightful results that will guide decisions, not just for governments, but also private sector, right? So I think that's a really key area. I can talk about other areas, but I think that's what I really want to emphasize on: data collection and data processing.
Cool. So for my other panelists, so the other question I had for you was around what new business models or markets could AI unlock on the continent?
Right, so I can think of three. The first one is what we are currently implementing at the Decarbonize initiative, that is dynamic pricing. When we perform or conduct carbon pre-feasibility studies, we're able to use AI and satellite imagery for mostly nature-based solutions to go and map out the particular area that we're looking at, the study area, and then now use machine learning algorithms to calculate the estimated carbon stock value. And using various formulas, we can convert it to carbon credits. So that kind of dynamic pricing is one. Number two is the real estate property valuation. So just the same method, AI and satellite imagery can be used to value various properties at a much higher value compared to others. For example, maybe one is in an area that is full of forest and everything versus one which is in the desert. Of course, the one in the forest is going to be much more value. And then the third one is in terms of like platform that brings various stakeholders together. For those who understand the carbon markets, they know that it's not easy for anyone to just come in and launch a carbon project. You need lots of funds and the stakeholders to, especially the grassroots farmers and everything, they are left out. So if we're able to have an AI model that can be able to aggregate all these stakeholders together and make it a bit fair, that would be amazing.
Okay, thanks. So one of the biggest challenges I've seen in this space is essentially for smaller players. So the time it takes to verify the credits is one of the biggest challenges, and then the other one is around the verifiers, right? So you can produce the credits, but then it needs to be verified, and that can be a very long process. It could be like two years before you can actually monetize the carbon credits. And so, like, how do you guys, or like, what are some of the solutions that besides AI that we could come up with to enable more people to access those credits by either whether pre-financing them so that they can generate those credits, or aggregating different players, or using technology in some of the cases to do that. And then also like in terms of how do we get more verifiers based on the continent, because if you see a lot of the verifiers are coming from abroad, and it takes time to get their time or to get them to come here, and that's a very expensive because you need to cater for their cost to come here. And so could you just like talk to that, and probably like some of the solutions around that? No, I think Caroline probably can answer that question, and then Flo, you can probably chip in.
When I started developing carbon projects, it was a very manual, tedious, time-consuming task, especially for nature-based projects, as Alice was saying. And just tasks like defining the baseline of your project area would take months of work, looking into loads and loads of satellite data that were not very that do not have fine resolution. But now the space has changed so much, and there's more and more service providers that are offering DMRV solutions. And for some of the projects that I'm working on, defining the baseline of a project and even more innovative ways of baselining and additionality like dynamic performance benchmarks, for example, in afforestation, reforestation projects, can be done in just a few weeks through AI-trained models and through satellite global data sets that have become available, even LiDAR data that is now open source and available. And these data sets are used to train AI that is then enhanced by ground truth data. And then the ground truth data then takes even less time, which was a very tedious process. And therefore, you can reduce on your sampling intensity and then use that hybrid approach to develop what you would call high integrity, high quality data. And therefore, when buyers or investors or whoever is retiring the credits, then they have confidence that the baselines or the crediting is conservative and that it is not merely based on counterfactual estimates. So that has really changed the space. And even the standards that are coming up, your legacy standards like the Veras and the gold standards, but there is more and more newer standards that are coming up that have taken more and more advantage of these models, and therefore even supporting carbon developers, supporting them with the development and the data processing. And through AI, that has even enabled smaller and smaller projects to access the space where the heavy MRV costs could really lock out small projects. So I think the space is really changing, and we will see more and more accessible projects. But of course, the lower quality projects will get squeezed out. So we're seeing more and more calls for high integrity and data that is verifiable, and AI has a strong place in that.
So the other bottleneck with carbon markets or carbon credits is around regulations, right? So you've seen a lot of governments trying to get bring regulations around, or whether tax some of these revenues that you're generating from that, or, have oversights in terms of how you're engaging communities in some of these projects. And so what's the role of governments in facilitating a lot of this interaction, or a lot of this, carbon project development on the continent? Because I think in some of the cases it's become a bottleneck because, they want to tax everything and, prevent, developers from actually accessing those markets. And then also on the compliance side of it, it's like, it's still a very tedious process to get a letter of no objection from the government. And so how do we ensure that, governments are playing a better or facilitating a lot of the project developers to access those markets? So I don't know, Alice or Flo can answer that question.
Yeah, happy to answer the question. I think I also tie it to the previous question that you asked. I think we have a problem about not understanding the local context, right? And the first thing that is a huge challenge around that is the lack of data. And I think Caroline just really provided a really good path to actually collecting more data, using satellites, drones, IoT devices. And I think that's one way. But the second thing is really lack of clarity on two levels. The first level is regulation. We don't really have encouraging regulation for such projects. And I think I see a lot of capital going towards investments and project development, but we need more advocacy, more policy advocacy on that side. I think there's just no way around it. And I think there should be a certain part of the budget allocated to that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think we also need to decentralize the international organization in charge of verification. That will also guide our government in terms of what type of regulation would be ideal. I think we don't have enough organizations based on the ground basically providing standardization of the processes. And having such organization will really guide the regulation and how we shape the laws in charge of this space. Yeah.
Thanks. Any additional comments on that, Alice or anyone else in the panel? Yeah.
Is it on? Okay. So I was going to say, actually, Kenya's done a lot around regulation. So Kenya's kind of been a leader in carbon market regulation. And so I don't know whether I would say that the regulation, there needs to be more. Maybe it needs to be clearer. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say there needs to be more at this point. I think the standards are clear. I think that you're like aiming to African carbon project developers should meet the global integrity standards, but they shouldn't feel that they have to go beyond, because that's putting an unfair additional cost on them.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on what the rest have said, we have this data bias, so most of the data is collected from Western countries, and there's not much localized data sets, so that will be, I think, the first step that the government should look into helping us gather and train models with localized data sets. And the second one would be to help with building data centers, and these data centers should be open source. So this means that various companies, organizations can tap into that and train their models in a shared collaborative way in order to have like this kind of interoperability and ensure data integrity.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, regulations are definitely an important piece of developing the market, and it also provides confidence to investors looking in that it is a regulated space. Of course, there's been integrity concerns and a lot of scrutiny into carbon projects. So those safeguards are very necessary to ensure that carbon projects are being developed in a fair and equitable environment. But of course, there's also a balance which allows enough investment to flow into those projects, because they are very, most of them are quite capital intensive and would require that kind of investment coming from outward. I think what the other side of that is that it introduces some level of bureaucracy, which already exists in the carbon market with registering carbon standards. So just governments making that process a bit smoother for developers and not adding extra hurdles, like documentation that needs to be submitted to different offices at different levels of the government, from county to national, and different offices also not communicating very well. I think those time constraints add extra cost burdens to projects, and in that way also limits the growth of the market. But definitely a much needed thing.
Cool. Thank you so much. I'd made time for a few Q&A, like questions from the audience. So if anyone has any questions about to the panelists, so you can probably raise your hand. Probably we'll take 1 or 2 questions or 3 questions. Ed, can we have?
Hope it's going to be worth the wait. Sorry about that. Thanks for the microphone, and thanks very much for the really interesting session in this important area. Abel, I'm going to ask for 2 questions if it's not too greedy.
Yeah, no, you can ask 2 questions.
Yeah.
Make it brief.
Okay, fair enough. The first one I think is, how do you, sorry, I'm Ed Burbage, I'm with Icon, we're a tech investment bank. And my question is, how do you feel we should go about valuing carbon credit revenue in businesses in Africa at the moment, given the volatility of the market and pricing and revenue streams? My second question is, moving on from carbon credits, I know some of the panel talked about nature finance a number of times, moving into biodiversity credits, nature for debt swaps. How do you see that playing out in our landscape? And so, Abel, happy for you to take the first one and to direct the second one to your panel, if that's okay.
Okay. On the first question, in terms of carbon revenues, I think we treat it as any other revenue, right? And I think we do probably on the compliance market. So on the compliance market, it seems it's a lot more stable because, you know, once you get the letter of no objection from the government, you're able to access these markets that are regulated. And so it's mandatory for companies to essentially like offset those. And you know, like the penalty for not doing that is you need to buy this, you know, carbon from these markets. And some of the countries have been very progressive, whether it's Japan, South Korea, and those, and the EU. And I guess it's difficult to access the EU market, but I think, you know, South Korea and Japan markets, and I think Switzerland have been probably the more progressive in that space. And so when I look at carbon revenues, I kind of try to split it between voluntary and compliance, because I think voluntary is very volatile and you can't really predict, and it's a lot of time it's probably not recurring compared to compliance, where, you know, once you've pretty much signed up, I think there's more predictability around that. And so in some of the cases, obviously some businesses we've invested in are entirely dependent on carbon revenues, and so that's the main revenue source. For some businesses, it's pretty much like an add-on, and for those ones I usually discount it, because especially if it's targeting the voluntary market, because you know, like it's unpredictable. You can't really, like, you know, you'll find some people like they're projecting like, you know, carbon revenues will be significant, but if you look at the actual business model, it's really not dependent on carbon. But I think for the ones that are dependent on carbon, you know, like it's a do or die thing, so they have to really make it work. And I would say, I don't know what multiple I would put on them, but depending on the industry, like, you know, a comparable multiple would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that.
I hope I've answered your question, but yeah, thank you.
Sorry, yeah, thanks, Abel. Just to add to that, I will say what I try to encourage companies or developers, as a matter of fact, in this space is the carbon market should be additive, not your main source of revenue, really. What I have seen in most places, or what I encourage, because when you truly depend on these kind of markets and the prices are very much shifting, it's really hard to predict revenues. That's one. And then two, one thing I always encourage companies is to invest a lot in your research and development, your R&D. I feel like the carbon market should really be offsetting a future cost, so ensuring that basically you are more sustainable on your own in the future. So if the carbon credits are able to actually help you to reach that kind of level, I think it's very helpful, instead of just being your whole source of revenues.
For the second question, could you answer that, Alice?
Do you remember the second question? What was the second question?
Ed, can you ask the second question again, clearly? Sorry.
Should I shout? And Ed's here. Yeah, it was just moving on from carbon credits, then moving on to nature. One or two of the panel talked about nature, so biodiversity credits, debt for nature swaps. How do you see that playing out?
So yeah, biodiversity credits, how I'm seeing it, it's pretty nascent, and there's still a lot of thinking going in there, and learning is also from what we've seen from carbon credits. And some of the challenges being that biodiversity cannot be standardized as a unit like carbon credits have. So we know a carbon credit is a ton of CO2 equivalent, but how do we standardize biodiversity? Is it a hectare? Is it by the species abundance or species-related metrics? And there's been a couple of standards that have developed methodologies and how they see it best to quantify what nature conservation or nature enhancement could look like and what those gains could look like. The other challenge is offsetting biodiversity is not really practical, because if you degrade leopard habitat in one part of Africa and then try to offset that with the habitat of an elephant somewhere else, then that's not practical, and it beats the whole point of biodiversity protection. So I think how I see it is that the market makes sense for organizations, funds that are looking to fund results-based biodiversity work, and probably not necessarily offsetting, as is the case in carbon credits. So pulling funds that could flow into biodiversity work, and you want to see verifiable gains in habitats, in species that has actually been verified by a standard and possibly third parties, then in that way, there's finance flowing into biodiversity, but not a copy and paste of carbon credits, and that there's also verifiable nature stewardship and by communities, and there's an actual uplift of community lives. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. Like, I've seen a few businesses where, like they're talking about biodiversity credits, and one of the biggest challenges is around standardization of that or verification of that. And hopefully AI can help figure that out, whether it's using satellite imagery to enable you to, and then combination of that and AI to kind of enable more of those to be standardized. But for now, I think the biggest challenges has been essentially you need to have a combination of on-the-ground truth, like in terms of like having IoT devices planted in the forest and all that stuff, but it's very tedious job and it's very hard to verify. But hopefully with new technology, AI and all that stuff, that will happen. So I think we've run out of time for this, and so as a conclusion, I'd love to thank my panelists for your contribution, and also the audience for listening to us babble through this discussion. And yeah, hopefully we'll see a lot more business models unlocked by AI, especially in the carbon space, and we'll see more democratization, better verification through the use of AI on the continent, and hopefully we'll have local verifiers who can help, unlock a lot of these opportunities for smallholder farmers, for startups, for local communities on the continent. So thank you so much for listening to us, and looking forward to interacting with a lot of you. Thank you.